Hello, divine creations, divine marvels, children of God. Thank you so much for joining in. And good morning, afternoon, and evening to you are, wherever you are in the world. So, what I'm noticing is that I'm alive. And if you're watching this, you're alive. And that is something that I'm learning how to not take for granted. Now, I'm not saying that just because of the current world health situation. I'm saying that because life is a gift. And because life in these bodies, according to Bruno Gröning, is a very precious, special, rare, really, opportunity. And so I'm learning to every day spend at least a moment, if not many moments, being grateful for this opportunity to be alive here in this body. So, in sharing the teachings of Christ that were so simply and directly pointed out to us by Bruno Gröning. And for anyone who's new, Bruno Gröning was a very simple, humble man who lived in post-World War II Germany, around whom the absolute miraculous happened. Blind people regained their vision, paralyzed people stood up out of their wheelchair. And Bruno Gröning taught as well. And he said that what he was teaching was not his teaching, but simply the teaching of Jesus Christ. In essence, that he was teaching what Christ taught, and in essence doing what Christ did, not just for a few people, for tens of thousands of people. And Bruno Gröning pointed out that the opportunity to be in a body here on this earth is very precious and very rare, and that we really need to make really good use of our time here. So in these meetings, in talking about these teachings, some days I feel like I talk too much about evil, and sometimes I feel like I talk too little about it. So Bruno, just like Christ, pointed out that there is an almighty, all-good power, and Bruno called that God. And that spoke just like Christ did, that God is our loving parent. And Bruno Gröning, just like Christ, pointed out that there is an evil force, consciousness. Bruno used the word Satan, the devil, just as it's written Jesus did, that there's not only this evil force, but an evil being that's literally trying to lead us off the good path into a path of suffering and misery. Now, whether you specifically believe that there is a being such as the devil, it's not so important to me whether someone believes that or not. I consider that more of a metaphysical or a spiritual or religious belief. But what I've come to realize is absolutely essential on the spiritual or religious or really life path is the recognition that there is an evil force, a power, consciousness that is very strong. This is absolutely necessary to recognize, to make any progress on the spiritual path. Why? Because without that recognition, we are, any person is really, how to say it, subject to that force. Meaning, if I'm not aware of a problem, I can't adequately respond to it. And this is a very, what we're talking about here is something very fundamental. I'm trying to find an analogy that might make it clear. Well, okay, let's say we're thirsty and that there are two ponds. and there's two wells. And one well has healthy, clean, pure water, and another well has a water in it that, or has a slight poison in it. And this poison doesn't just kill us, but slowly corrodes, slowly has this, not only affects our body, but has us start to think negatively, start to act negatively. But it starts off, it's a very subtle poison. And then over time it builds. And part of how it operates is that it then keeps the person in denial that these things are even going on. In essence, the poison makes someone sick and then keeps them unaware of the fact that they're sick and unaware of what's causing it. And so let's say you know, everyone needs water every day, but which well you go to is going to make a huge difference. So I use this metaphor to try and bring forth a couple of ideas. One is this understanding of good and evil is fundamental to our life. If we're drinking this in this, I guess it's a parable. I didn't mean to create a parable, but I guess I just did. You know, if we're drinking from the poisoned well, not only are we going to become unwell, but over time we'll get less and more and more unwell, less and less well, and not even be aware of what's causing it. And without being aware of what's causing it, we cannot adequately respond or treat or overcome this problem. The other part of this, I feel a little uncomfortable calling it a parable, but anyway, that is what it is. The other part of this parable that's so important is that part of how evil operates, and in this story, part of how this poison operates is it clouds the person's understanding to what's actually going on. In essence, it makes them unconscious. It gives them kind of forgetting. Like, for example, maybe the person drinks from the well and they feel momentarily unwell, but then this forgetfulness comes over them and they don't quite connect the dots. Well, that's exactly how evil operates. It keeps itself in the shadows to what's really going on. For example, just as Christ pointed out, Bruno Gruning pointed out that all illnesses come from evil. Part of how evil hides this is with the false belief that, you know, illness just happens for no reason. This is so significant because if you don't understand the root cause, then, for example, let's say I have tendinitis. I don't have tendinitis right now. I don't think I've ever had it, but that's not important. I don't have it right now. But so without this understanding of what's causing a tendinitis, then you know, I'll just go to the doctor and just think, oh, I have this illness. I don't know why it came about, but I'm just going to go to the doctor. He'll give me some exercises or some medicine, and that'll get rid of it. That'll cure it. Well, it may temporarily relieve the tendinitis. It may get to the point where the tendinitis goes away, but the tendinitis is just a symptom. So let's go back to our metaphor. The person with the parable, you know, with the well, they're taking in this poison, and here we go. They're taking in this poison, forget tendinitis, arthritis, and they start to get arthritis. So they go to the doctor, and the doctor says, well, you do these exercises, and you know, you take these supplements or you take these pills. And let's say those exercises or pills get rid of the arthritis, get rid of the symptoms of the arthritis. The person's like, I'm cured. The thing is, they're not cured. They still have the poison within them that caused the arthritis. And it's either going to cause the arthritis to arise again, or it's going to cause another illness. And so then the person goes and gets that illness, you know, let's say the next illness is tendinitis. So then they go and they get that illness treated. And they're like, and then the tendinitis gets cured, but then they've not actually been cured because the poison is still in their system, and over time the poison's just getting stronger. And then they get another illness, and maybe what they're given is medicine by the doctor. And of course, most modern medicines are actually harmful. So the person's going around curing all these things, but over time they're getting weaker. And that's why it's so important to understand evil, because evil doesn't just create physical illnesses, it also creates psychological. For example, someone takes in some evil and then they have anxiety. Well, then they go and they get some counseling and maybe the anxiety is reduced, but then they have codependence. Okay, well, they go and get some counseling for codependence and then that gets reduced. But then they start to exhibit PTSD type symptoms. Well, they're starting to get tired, so they go to see a doctor, this time who gives them a medication. And that medication then reduces the PTSD symptoms. But of course, that medication is harmful to the body. And all the while, the evil that's causing all these different things is growing stronger. So on the surface, it looks like, oh, I've made progress. I cured the anxiety. And then, oh, I made progress. Like I have less codependence. And then, oh, look, there's less PTSD symptoms. But what's really happening is over time, the person is getting weaker because the evil, the poison within them is getting stronger. And now to the point where they're taking medication, which alleviates the symptom, but hasn't treated the cause. And then the medication actually weakens the body, which then lets in more evil. So it's okay if you don't, a lot of people don't like the word evil. I understand. I was one of them. You can call it negativity, delusion, illusion, ego, whatever you want to call it. But if there's not a clear recognition that there is a power, a harmful power, then all that's ever going to happen on the spiritual path, the life path, or the religious path is just this treating of symptoms. While the it, whatever you call it, whether you call it evil, ego, evil, ego, illusion, delusion, attachment, whatever you call it, then you're just going to hop around treating symptoms while it, the thing that's causing all this suffering, gets stronger. So to make any progress in life, much less on the spiritual path, and the more I get into this, I'm just starting to think that life itself is a spiritual path. We have to understand the thing that Bruno Gröning called evil. So that's a lot. And let's take in some medicine then. And so we've talked a lot about what the real problem is, and that all the little problems that we're struggling with are actually just symptoms. So let's take the medicine. Bruno Gröning, just like Christ, said that the medicine is God. So let's take some of that in. Take in some of the divine power, the power of God that actually heals in the true sense of the word. It heals in the sense of removing evil, not just getting rid of symptoms, getting rid of the cause of symptoms. It's very easy to do this. Please sit with your legs uncrossed, feet flat on the floor, hands on your legs, palms facing upwards, back in an upright position, not stiff, but not slouched over either. And if possible, not leaning against your chair. If you need to sit against your chair, that's okay. And then please close your eyes. And now hand over all illnesses, meaning separate yourself from the thought that you even have an illness. If you have, quote, arthritis, please give away the idea of arthritis to where you can't even have that thought anymore, where that thought just doesn't make any sense. separating yourself from these things, handing them over to your understanding of a higher power. And now thinking about your healing, thinking about release from all evil, meaning health and happiness and wellness. Then ask to receive the divine healing energy. It can be a short prayer. It can just be as simple as, please, I want to receive the healing energy. Or it can just be engaging your will to receive this energy. And then observe the body, noticing what you feel. Recognizing that every sensation you now feel is a step towards your healing, a step towards recovery. Noticing what you feel. Every sensation, a healing in progress, recovery happening. If you become aware of negative thoughts, please hand them over. Really taking in this divine energy. So to anyone who's new, a very warm welcome. And I invite people to continue tuning in. I'm going to talk a little more and read a little bit. So there's nothing wrong with treating symptoms. I do it myself. I take supplements, I exercise, I do stretches when I feel tight. But what is important is the recognition of the root cause. Without that, I know that I'm just spinning my wheels over and over. I think in Greek mythology, there's the story of the Hydra, a creature who, when you cut off one of the Hydra's heads, it already has multiple heads. It's like a dragon with multiple heads. When you cut off one of its heads, two heads regrow in that place. And that's a beautiful metaphor for what it's like to contend with evil. If we just treat a symptom, in essence, there's a way in which oftentimes we make the evil stronger. Especially if you take, if it's something, such as a lot of medication, and I know from personal experience, is very hard on the body. It's very unnatural. It has its place. I'm not telling anyone not to use it, and over time, very harmful to the body. The other thing is that with all these different attempts so really what it comes down is to guidance, is to recognize the root cause of any problem is evil and to ask for clear guidance. How would you have me approach this? Sometimes individuals are guided. I'm guided, and I know others are too. Sometimes people are guided, no, I'm just going to rely on the energy to heal this. And sometimes there's the clear guidance. I need to add in something natural. I need to change my diet a little bit, or I need to exercise more, do this breathing practice. And then sometimes people are guided to then do something a little more intense interventions, such as surgery or medicine. So it's not my job to advise people specifically on what to do or what not to do. But as someone who shares these teachings, it's absolutely my job to point out, to remind people, and in doing so, to remind myself about what the root cause is, and hence what the root solution is. I've had things vanish in a second. For example, I at one point in my life, I was having frequent urination. I just had to go pee all the time, many, many times throughout the day. And so I went to the doctor, and I was getting just a general exam. And during the exam, the doctor gave me the diagnosis of a enlarged prostate, that was pushing on the bladder and creating pressure. And so my doctor's amazing. He recommended some natural herbs that could help, but I didn't feel like I needed those herbs. In that moment, I had the thought, Bruno Gröning has shrunk cases of, Bruno Gröning has shrunken tumors. He can shrink my prostate. That's the thought I had. And it was really, if you think about it, it's just a thought of absolute trust and faith. And I don't know if the healing happened in that moment, but from that day onward, I didn't have that problem anymore. Before that, every night I would wake up in the middle of the night and had to go to the bathroom. And then after that, sure, it would happen occasionally, once every couple of months. But before that, it was every single night. I had that thought of complete trust, and the problem just vanished. From that night onward, it was no longer necessary. So that's an example of, where something can just vanish in an instant. And, another thing that I experienced help with on this path was sleep medication. I was, when I first came to this path, I was on a lot of medication. And in fact, I was on 3 medications that were specifically to help with sleep. It was pretty intense. The first one, I was able to get off effortlessly. I just was like, no, I'm done with that. Or I think maybe, I cut it down a little bit, and I cut it down a little bit more, no problem. The second medication, I was able to reduce it with a little bit of struggle, and then able to reduce it with a little more struggle, meaning it was kind of hard to sleep without it. And then the last third of it, gone. I just one night I'm like, I'm done with it. And I fell asleep and didn't need it anymore. Now, the third medication took me almost 2 years to get off of it. And I also needed to use herbs, and it was quite the process. So as you can see from this, from this, basically this is a healing of dependence on sleep medication. And it had 3 phases because I had I was on 3 medications. The first one was effortless. I just cut it down some, no problem. A week later, cut it down some, then was completely off of it. No effort, no struggle. I just tuned in and had trust. The second one, there was a little bit of struggle, but overall, in the second one, I was on 3 milligrams. The first milligram, a little bit of struggle, meaning my sleep was a little disturbed without it. But then it got to normal again. So then I dropped the second milligram. Same thing, a little bit of struggle, but then no problem. The third milligram, I just decided I'm done. Or I just felt actually that I'm done with this. No struggle, sleep was fine. The third medication took time. Took a lot of time. I went up and down with it. Like I would get it down low and then I would need to take it back up. And then I got on herbs and then it was this whole involved process. So just from that, you can see that how a healing happens, each healing is completely different. Some are spontaneous, effortless. Some are mostly effortless and just happen very quickly. And some can be quite an entailed process. So what each healing looks like and how each person should proceed with a particular illness. We know to absolutely, in this path, to give away the thought, to not think about it, to not dwell on it, to not talk about it. And then whether to use something is very individual and needs to be between that person and God, or that person and their doctor or their health practitioner. So let's tune in for a minute, and I need 1 minute. My cat is trying to get out of this room. So please tune in, and I'll be right back. So taking all of this in, reflecting on that healing is actually a release from evil, and then the symptom just goes, and how that happens, it's different for each person and each healing. Noticing what you feel, taking in the good, recognizing that true healing is a release from evil, hence a release from the cause of all problems. As Bruno Gröning said, healing is sanctification. In German, Heilung ist Heiligen. Heiligen. I may be pronouncing the second one. That healing is sanctifying, meaning the process of being made more holy. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining in today. And I wish everyone deep reflection on what's the cause. We all want to be happy, healthy, and harmonious. I haven't met a single person who doesn't want those things. And the question is, why don't we have them? And what do we need to do to get them? There's a billion answers in the world. And Bruno Gröning's answer is very simple. Free yourself from all evil through the process of connecting to, relying on, depending on, trusting in God. Bruno Gröning said, and I'm utterly convinced that Christ was teaching the same thing, that the only real solution is the divine, is God, because that's the only solution that gets at the real problem, which is evil. So I'm going to close this out with a prayer. Beloved Maker, beloved Christ, and our dear friend Bruno, please help us to be humble and recognize our need for God and our need for nature. Please help us to deepen and to recognize what our problem is, evil, and that of our own devices, without the divine, evil is stronger than us. Please help us to deepen our faith in the divine, the true solution to all our problems. Please help us to turn to and seek that power, which is greater than all of our problems, and to really commit to walking the good path, meaning following God, following that power. Please bring to light, into awareness, all the things that disconnect us from God, all the things that block us, and be willing to release them. Help us to be honest with ourselves and then be willing to release them. And right here, right now, and as we become aware of them in our lives, we humbly ask the divine, please free us from everything that interferes with our connection with you. Please help us to feel regret for the wrongs we've done, and if possible, to make them right, to make amends. And please help us to dedicate our day to having the divine connection moment by moment and seeking guidance moment by moment to follow God. Please help us to be mindful of our thoughts, and to be crystal clear which thoughts are from God and which thoughts are from evil, and to firmly say no to any thought that's not good, that's not of God. Please help us to rigorously examine our lives, examine every thought, word, and deed, and to recognize which ones are in alignment with God and which ones aren't. To call ourselves to order, as Bruno Gröning said. Please help us to have faith and trust that we will be freed from all evil. And please help us to learn the lessons, learn our individual lessons that will get us to that point, so that we can then help others to solve, in essence, to solve the real problem that we are facing, so that we can help others do so. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. I'm very grateful for these gatherings. I'm very grateful that our dear friend Bruno Gröning was willing to come and put up with what he put up with. I can't even fathom, to give us these teachings and to pass along this divine energy. Thanks to everyone who came by. Thanks to everyone who said hello. Thank you, Jisoo. Thanks for ever loving everything. Thank you, Gerald. Thank you, Magdalena. Thank you, Ulrike. You're all so very welcome. I thank each one of you. Take care. Much love.